So today, I have the great honor of bringing an incredible friend of mine, someone that has been a mentor to me, a coach to me, a teacher to me for the last about 17 years of my life. Lynn was the director of innovation for Franklin Covey. She has her own company, Soul Salt Inc., who is just doing great things for our community and great things for our world around us. So please put your hands together and type in "Welcome Lynn" into the chat. Our good friend, Lynn Christian. What's up, Lynn?
Hello. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How are you today?
I'm well, and I'm so excited to be with you. I'm in my cockpit ready to go.
I know you got those kind of headphones are totally in style now.
Yeah, well, they're brand new. My daughter bought them for me. She says, "You need these." So.
Oh, nice. Well, hey, the topic tonight, and I'm super excited because I'm a total dork. The topic tonight, of course, is we want to get into what is the neuroscience of trust. But I've seen that you've been posting a lot about trust and especially self-trust lately. So why is trust such an important thing for us right now?
Well, we've had a lack of it. We've had our foundation sort of shaken. And it's always been important, but I think it's come to front of mind most recently because we've, in some situations, felt a dearth of it. And so the three things I would answer your question with are these, Andrew. Consider that there are three things around trust that are always happening, even when we don't know it. We're either breaking trust, building trust, or teetering between the two. And we do less time teetering between and spend more time breaking or building. It's always in the background.
That's a great point, and I don't think I would have potentially thought about that because you're right. It's kind of like you're either in one place or the other most of the time, I would think. And so with wanting to understand kind of the neuroscience factor of it, why do you feel like it would be important for us to even care about what's happening up here?
Well, so go through a little story, and maybe I can share it with a story if that's okay.
Oh yeah.
So imagine you're working with a team and you're a creative part of the team, and the team lead comes to you on a Monday and says, "We have a week to complete this, and here's your part of it." And you look at what they're handing you and you get so excited because you know it's right up your lane. It's something you're excited about doing. You have the strengths and you're going, "Great, I can get into this. I have 5 days." So you jump into it and you're working away at it. And by Wednesday, 11 o'clock in the morning, the team lead comes to you and says, "We don't have till Friday. It's due tomorrow." Okay, now imagine what's happening to you right now. How are you feeling? What are you thinking? And do you have a somatic or a body response to that? All right.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's say that by 10, he came in at 11, and by 11:30, you just can't handle it anymore. And you're reaching out to some of the people on your team going, "Are you freaking out? I'm freaking out." And one of the team members says, "You're just finding out today. I knew this Monday afternoon."
Yeah.
Now, what are you thinking and feeling? And what is your body experiencing?
Well, I think I'd be thinking and feeling, why the hell wasn't I informed? And why am I on the outside of I think about the movie Meet the Fockers. You're on the outside of the circle of trust, Fokker.
Yeah. So you have a lot of experiences with what's going on. Let's say that by noon on that very same day, after you've had this exchange and you're like, "Why the hell did this happen?" The team lead comes back to you and says, "I don't think this is fair that we only have until tomorrow. I went to the mat, I arm wrestled our producer or whoever you were working for, and I've bought us until next Wednesday. We're all in the clear. We're good to go. It's not due Friday, it's due next Wednesday. So we have a week from now." Now, how would that change the way that you're feeling and what you're thinking and what your body is experiencing?
So I guess I would start to feel like, okay, I can calm down, I can relax a little bit. My overwhelming anxiety that I just felt when I thought it was due right now is starting to subside, and I'm calming down.
All right. So a number of things, and you can see a lot of people are having different experiences with this. But here's my point. You asked me, why is this important? We experience this lack of trust, breaking trust, building trust, or teetering between the two on a daily basis. You've experienced this probably more recently in, say, an intimate relationship that you might be having, where everything is just wonderful and there's oxytocin, and then one thing gets triggered and you are now not trusting. And it's all a function of where you are in your brain. Judith E. Glaser, who created Conversational Intelligence, who was my mentor for a while, was teaching me about these 4 parts of the brain, and I included them in my TEDx talk. But basically, during this story, you, myself, and the audience, we may have started in sort of the neocortex, which was right up here where you have a hoodie, and that's the thinking and the data analysis, learning, storing information part of our brain. We may have been there a little bit going, okay, I can do this. And then a part of us was in the prefrontal cortex going, I'm jazzed, I'm excited, I can see the future, I can nail this, this is going to be fun. So we were using the executive brain, which is in the prefrontal cortex, the neocortex, which is the thinking, learning brain. But as soon as the deadline was changed, we were thrown to the back of the brain. 2 parts, the brainstem, which is scanning and watching and sending, more information's coming up from the body. You know this from your neuroscience, to the head brain, then is going down. So every part of us is screaming, what the heck, right, or what the hell, we're not safe. And then the amygdala, which is on the temporal side of both sides of the brain, which, and among other things, stores a history of our emotional situations, our emotional experiences. It's saying, warning, we can't trust this person. This isn't fair. I can't pull this off. Somebody upset my whole life now. And so we have all of those things going on in the back of the brain, and we can't help it because the back of the brain is there for survival. And so it's going to excrete things like adrenaline and cortisol. When we're up here in the neocortex thinking things through, or whenever we're stuck in our head, we're in the neocortex, which is kind of a wait and see. I don't know if I'm going to trust. Like, there might be a part of you still wondering, well, they changed the deadline once. Can I really trust that I have until next Wednesday? I'm going to get this done by Friday, like I planned. And some of the audience might be thinking that same thing too.
Yeah.
And then when we're in the prefrontal cortex, that's when we have a chance to maybe have an oxytocin. We might drop into the heart brain and the gut brain that you and I know so much about and feel serotonin coming up from the gut brain to say we're okay. So really, these things are happening in our autonomic nervous system without us having control. They are happening, and they are happening inside of us. They're happening from external sorts of stimuli. And so I guess I'm going to just come back to the reason it's important is we are going to be in 0.07 seconds, either moving from low trust, skepticism, criticism, not feeling safe about what just happened, to maybe going to higher trust or being stuck in the middle and wait and see. We can do that in a nanosecond, and it can reverse. And it's just a matter of what kind of conversational cocktail are we drinking? What's it doing to not just our autonomic nervous system, but and probably people on this call know, when our autonomic nervous system feels the same sort of hormone, like if we're constantly getting cortisol and the stress hormone, eventually we're going to be, and I call it congealing, this is not necessarily the necessary scientific term, we'll congeal into a state where we're going to be tense most of the time. And we've had one hell of a year where so many of us have been in that anxiety for long enough that our state was altered, and we're more anxious, we're more agitated than typically we were from 12 months ago. Right. There's a whole lot. I don't know if that kind of answered where you were going or even talked to where you were going. Yeah,
I mean, and to me, the one thing that always is helpful for me is when I hear the neuroscience behind it, it also kind of takes the beat myself up factor off of it too, because one of the things that I can then step back and look at is, well, this stuff isn't happening to me just because I'm a jerk, or just because I'm a pushover, or just because I'm a fill in the blank, how we tend to beat ourselves up with what we perceive of ourselves. These things are happening because it's based in neuroscience. It's actually something that, like you said, is autonomic too, where you don't really necessarily have control over it unless you directly take control over it, right?
Yeah, and I don't know that we want to have control of it unless, like you so astutely said, we want to take control of it, because that back of the brain, those two parts, the brain stem and the emotional brain, the limbic brain, they are there to keep us safe,
Right.
right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like when I was training for triathlons and I would do a lot of mountain sprints, and if I didn't get out early enough, and you know where Red Butte is and how infested it is with rattlesnakes,
Yeah.
if I didn't get out early enough and I would run into a snake in the morning just as I'm heading up, then every root, every line in the rock, everything that I encountered that could have looked like a snake, now my brain is activated to say, well, that might be a snake. Well, that might be a snake. Well, that might be a snake. And so I'm spending my time during training watching all these threats that are not really a snake, but they could be. They kind of look like one. That's just my brain trying to keep me safe. And so we want that to be there. It can be obnoxious, but we want that to be there for when there is a threat.
For sure.
And then, like you said, we want to be able to, okay, I'm in charge here. How am I going to regulate myself so that I don't get pulled off track?
Yeah. And this is actually a great question from Haley, because I think that a lot of us can probably relate to this. Once someone breaks your trust, they ever really earn it back, or is it relationship beyond repair? And to your point, it seems like if I've had that consistent relationship with someone where it's like, oh, just kidding, this is actually not due till next week. Oh, just kidding, now it's due now. It really starts to become something where it's really difficult to get back to a place to build trust with them.
Yeah, so let's keep the question up, because Haley brings a really good question to the forefront. And the answer is, it depends, of course.
Okay.
But let's talk about some of the dependencies. So if you have a history with this person where you feel like you're kind of jerked around, or you have a history with this person where it's sort of like, you can trust me now you can't, and you feel like you're a yo-yo, you may choose over time to say, I can't handle the fluctuation. My trust has been broken consistently. I need to put up a boundary. It could be the thing where we're going to break trust. Just the way we look. I mean, all of us, we probably don't remember, but there was probably a time where a primary caregiver was having a bad day and we wanted a smile. We needed a smile. We needed to know we were safe. And they had furrowed brow. And so we felt unsafe. But over time, it was like, okay, that can be repaired. So it depends. It depends on if you want to repair it. It depends upon what was happening that broke the trust. It depends upon the kind of agreements you had, if any of those agreements were broken. But I will say, Haley, that once you've been triggered and the trust is, you've been activated with cortisol and you're not trusting or you don't feel safe, it's going to take you maybe 20 minutes, even with somebody who says something to start warming your heart and you realize it was just a misunderstanding. It can take 20 minutes for that cortisol to metabolize, because it has a longer shelf life than, say, oxytocin, which is the cuddle hormone, the connection hormone. So I also know that I work with some executives who need to repair trust. And it can take up to 6 months, not to change their behaviors to be more trustworthy, but to get people around them to actually believe that they have changed.
Wow.
And that is a metric that I don't hold just in my practice, but Marshall Goldsmith, who's the #1 executive coach in the world, he has that same number in his practice. So I think it's a pretty viable number to go with, that sometimes it can take up to 6 months of hard work before the other person perceives that it's true. And we can talk about what are 5 things you can do to build trust and continually work on trust, if not just because you need to repair it, but because you want to have that trustworthy character trait, which is one part competence in doing what you say you will do, and one part character, showing up authentically and earnestly.
Yeah. And I think what you just shared is really key, because just even putting into perception that there's time that it takes to shift how we're feeling, it's time that it takes to rebuild that trust sense. I think knowing that also kind of takes some stress off of it, because, I mean, how many of you out there, put me in the chat, let's admit it, how many of you know that you have broken trust with someone before? I know
if you're human,
I can put my hand up loud and proud. We've all done it. But I think that that's great also to recognize that even if I mess up and I break some trust and I start to try to repair that, I have to give that person time and space. And again, what I get so dorked out about is it's not because they're trying to be resistant. It's because of neuroscience. It's because that cortisol has to have time to chill out, reabsorb into the body, stop overproducing, so that we can get back to a place that we can actually even be attentive and be in a place that we can accept that I'm sorry, accept that, you know what, that wasn't my intention. Let's go back here. It takes time. And the thing about 6 months, I mean, especially if trust is really deeply broken, I would think even in an intimate relationship, it could take months potentially to repair those trust issues. So great question, Haley, because that took us a night.
That was a great one. Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, we're getting lots of me's.
I saw that.
Me?
Who me?
Yeah, so let's talk about, how do you start to rebuild that trust? Like, how do you create that trustful environment?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be rebuilt like you just said. You can just do these 5 things. And these come right from Judith E. Glaser, but I want to share a little bit of where she picked up on this. Judith was my mentor. She created the body of knowledge known as Conversational Intelligence, which is studying the fact that our words matter, that the way we say them and our facial expression and the timing all comes together, because the quality of any culture, say the same Samvia culture, the quality of any culture in a family and a team is dependent upon the quality of their relationships. And those relationships are upon the kinds of conversations you're having. So we literally know, and you'll be fascinated with this, Andrew, we now know, because Angelica DeMoca, a double PhD, and I actually want to get this right, she has over 4,000 academic scientific citations behind her name.
Wow.
And where she really specializes is in neuroeconomics and neuromarketing. So she's really studied the science of trust, and she taught this to Judith. And basically what it is it's engaging when you're in the prefrontal cortex, so this executive brain that can co-create with other people, that can innovate, that can see the future. I mean, that's why the third eye chakra is there. And you and I both know there are about 40,000 neurites in the heart that send more messages up to the head brain. And we know there are complex neural networks in the heart and the gut that are now classified as functional brains. So what she found was that when there's a cybernetic loop, these two are connected. The heart neurons are firing with the prefrontal cortex. You can build trust with another person. So it's a function of head, heart, and I would include the gut, because there's deep identity in the gut, as you know, and also a drive in the gut to mobilize toward trust or move away from trust. So I think it's a head, heart, gut connection that you feel. And then when you're within that distance with another person, there's a cybernetic loop between you guys. And when there's a lot of that and a lot of rapport, you start showing up wearing the same outfit. You call each other. When you think of that person, they call you. You're texting at the same time. If you're together, you might start and finish each other's sentences. So this is backed by so much science, but I'm going to just lay it out to you in plain black and white. If you take the word trust and you write TRUST, R-U-S-T. And if you're taking notes, do this. This will be really helpful. You just write trust vertically.
I think I have that slide, but I have to look at a weird spot. I'm going to disappear off the screen for a second.
Okay, you disappear and look in that weird spot. I wonder where that weird spot is. I'm going to trust that you know where that weird spot is there. So the T stands for being transparent, meaning allowing yourself to tell people the why behind the what, being willing to reveal what's going on in the background. And so I made this doodle. This is my info doodle that I sketched out when Judith was teaching me this. And then I shared it with her and she was like, I love it. I'm going to use it too. So we're willing to be transparent and we quell the fears. And I heard a really good example of this recently where a woman came into her coaching session and she was really sort of ruffled. And I asked her what was going on. And she said, I really feel like I blew it with my daughter. And you've been working with me on transparency. So is it okay if I step away for 5 minutes and repair? And I said, sure. When she came back, she gave me the whole story. Before she came on the session initially, she had been so upset with her daughter. She was working on pre-algebra because her daughter was home and she was homeschooling her. So when she left to come on to coaching, she left in a huff. And her daughter didn't realize why. But when she came into the coaching, she said, I don't know how to do pre-algebra and it's pissing me off because I used to do it in 6th and 7th grade and I can't help my child and I feel like an idiot. And then she realized that she had acted inappropriately with her daughter and left her daughter wondering, well, is her daughter feeling like an idiot now? And so she went back and repaired and explained, I have to tell you why I was so upset. It's because I don't know it. So when I finish coaching, let's go find a pre-algebra tutor. I'll take classes with you and let's relearn it. You can learn it, I'll relearn it. So that transparency of being willing to share. Hair designers know this. There's a certain amount of who you are that you share with the people in your chair so that you can start to build trust because they're going to spill the beans all day long. They're going to tell you, you're that behind the chair psychologist.
Yes.
But you have to share a little part of you so that you're willing to reveal the right amount so that there can be a trust bond. So transparency is the very first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is...
Can I just pause?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Right there for a second, Lynn, because I think that's something that, because there are a lot of hairdressers watching here. When I first became a hairdresser, one of the things I was always taught was that the focus should pretty much just be 100% on the person in the chair. We shouldn't talk about ourselves. We shouldn't discuss personal things, anything like that. I feel, and you guys let me know if you feel this has changed too, but I feel this has changed significantly, especially in recent years, because people want to know who they're working with. They're not just looking for a service. They're not just looking for a haircut. They're very much looking for a relationship. And so I think what you just shared, being able to show up with some transparency and doing it in a way that's appropriate, for sure, but offering them some transparency, I could see that really opening up that trust bond with them and, not feeling like you have to be on stage in front of them, not feeling like you can't share something personal about yourself. Because, they're going to hopefully feel that trust with you and open up even more to you then too. Yeah, yes. Shirley saying they want the give and take, and Ryan saying he totally agrees. Lorraine is saying yes, for sure. So, I think that things have changed.
Well, they have, and also, we've always needed that connection. Like right. We're wired. We would rather go through physical pain than not be connected. And some of us do that when we're in relationships with narcissists. Is we'd rather go through the physical up and down than not be connected to somebody. We're just hardwired for it. And I think the key is, just to put the capstone on transparency, is finding out what are the parts of you that you divulge. Like some of my clients know I love pie. They know I'm a competitive athlete, even though I'm 61 years old. They know little things about me. And so you might want to think right now, what are some of those appropriate things that you can share that show some transparency, that put yourself out there, that is reciprocated by them. So there's one.
Beautiful.
The second one is respect. And this just means we talk to them the way, think about the golden rule. Another part of respect is seeing capacity in the other person. I'll bet the people that you relate to the best are the people you look at, and you can see they have traits that you admire, probably some strengths. You use respectful words with them, and you want what's best for them. And I would be curious if a few people on the call, on our chat, might just chime in right now. What are some great examples of how you show respect, or you've had respect shown to you that did nothing but enhance the level of trust with another person?
It'll take just a second. There's a little delay.
Yeah. And Earl, you're right. It's knowing how much to give in the transparency is so key. It's so key. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'll put in my answer while they're typing. But one of the ways that I show trust is to listen. Like, just show that I'm actually listening. But Kathy jumped right in there too with the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So listening to other people. Yeah. Acknowledging the client. There you go. Yep. Hear and be heard. Personal messages. Yes. Yes. So respect. That is huge. And I think we're in a time that's so exciting where we get to redefine what does respect look like.
Right.
Allowing your own mobility. These are really great. So let's go to the third one. This is another one that I drew another doodle for it. If you want to see the doodle, I have it hanging on my board here. But imagine that we all have an umbrella that we're holding throughout the day. And for some of us today, there are Lucky Charms and rainbows and leprechauns underneath that, and we're wearing our green. But there are some days when there are rain clouds, when things are not so happy. And there are some times when maybe there's lightning and we're angry. So we all sort of have this weather, this internal weather going on. And the thing that Judith taught me was to understand. Trust requires understanding. So get under the umbrella for just a second. You don't need to camp out there. That's not trustworthy. That's not respectful. Check in and find out, where is that other person coming from? They're having a different reality than you. And so understanding what that reality is super important. And I'm going to get the doodle for you. So
okay, cool.
You can still hear me, but I doodled this up for Judith so that you can remember to stand under the other person's reality.
Nice.
And so get under that umbrella and see where they are. And somebody's asking if they can share the trust doodle, and I'm like, share away. Please do. Judith would love it to go out there.
For sure.
So I'm curious, either you or someone here on the call, tell us about ways to listen, maybe listen to connect, listen with an open heart. How do you take steps to understand another person? And Beth, thanks. Looks good to see a fellow doodler.
Yeah. I think it was Erica. She mentioned the thing that came to mind too, is that trying to find that space of non-judgment, which is really challenging because I think inherently we have our biases based on how we were brought up, based on our experiences within the world. But to try and understand someone, I think we have to try our best to put those things to the side in that moment so that we're not going through the process of trying to make out right or wrong or good or bad during the conversation.
Yeah, and Shirley's saying ask questions. Ryan saying sit down with them. That's so important. Twyla, pause and ask someone how they really are or what's going on in their world. And if somebody's been stressed, I learned this from Andrew Huberman in a Neuroscience podcast. If somebody's feeling stressed or they've had stress in their past and they come and visit with you again, or you're checking in on them, it's better to ask them, hey, what are you learning? Than to say, hey, how are you? Now, there are certain times with, hey, how are you doing? You can feel the empathy. You can feel the other person reaching out because they really want to know. And I think that's what some of these comments are getting to. The non-judgmental, again, listening, really caring. How are you really? There's also, I remember when you told me about this, what did you learn from that? Can you see how that helps them not dive into the emotion as much as helps them stay really competent but heard, and you want to understand their experience? So that's another way to do that.
Beautiful.
Should we go to the next one?
Oh, whoops, that's not the one I wanted to hit.
Here you go.
Too many buttons,
success. Yeah, too many. This is where we co-create a win-win-win where everybody gets capital letters on their win. The way I talk about it is strategizing, trying to find mutual success. It doesn't have to be like compromise. It's more of like, okay, I need this, you need this. They don't have to be diametrically opposed. How do we meet both of our needs? And I think this goes way beyond finding compromise, way beyond give and take. So this one is harder to find sometimes, but it's where you find mutual success. What can be a big win for you and me that we can put together? That takes extra effort, but I find that the more we do this, the faster trust grows. And I'm wondering if anybody's ever had that, where instead of compromising and you have to give up something, have you ever been in a situation? And again, this is more rare, but I'll bet there's somebody on our call today that has, where you put what you want, they put what they want, and you put it together. This house I'm living in with my partner, we both put in what we wanted, and lo and behold, we came around a corner one day and it was up for sale. And we'd been looking for a year. There it was, and it was mutual success. So I'll bet somebody has an example, and I'd love to hear, maybe you have the example here. I don't know, Andrew.
I'm gonna do like a big yes on this one, because this, when I first got introduced to CIQ, when I first read the Conversational Intelligence book, the co-create aspect was just huge, because we have been taught that for two people that maybe have different perspectives to come together in some way, that someone has to give up something.
Right.
That doesn't always have to be true. I mean, like you said, I do think that maybe there's times where, yes, maybe I have to say, you know what? Yeah, this is important to me, but it's not as important as making sure that we get through this together. But for the most part, I think there's almost always an opportunity if both parties are ready to look for it. Because I think that's where the challenge comes in, is like, if it's two people kind of trying to vie for something, to capture something, that's not co-creativity, that's competition. And so we're looking for, okay, who's going to give some space, who's going to give up here? And instead coming together and being like, you know what? I think that there's a place that both of us get exactly what we want and exactly what we need from this situation. So let's create that together. Let's do that together. What? Like, that's huge, right?
It's really huge. And the place I've gotten the most pushback on this, but they worked through it, was when I was working with 3 engineers from a communist country. And win-win-win was really not in their vernacular. And we worked on it, and they came up with a solution that sort of blew my mind. So I know that this does take a little more work, but it is it expands who you are. It expands possibilities whenever you can approach it this way.
Yes, for sure. And talk about oxytocin.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and I love Ryan says, then the prize has so much more meaning to it. Lorraine is saying we're different, but we are definitely the same. Yes, Erica, this is awesome, isn't it? Hi, Adele.
You ready for that last one? See what kind of discussion it brings up? So this is a kind of a final T that says test assumptions, but in its essence, basically what we're doing is finding a way to say the hard thing in a palatable manner, to say what is true, to build enough trust with somebody. And I know Sheryl Sandberg, who has been this high profile female leader. she'll take months to build trust with people, and then she'll use this rigorous candor with them when she feels like they need to hear something. That's what this is about, is being willing to say the truth, even if you feel like it might send out some waves, it might upset, but finding the palatable words, and maybe even using some of John Gottman's work on how to do a soft startup where you build to the point where you can say what's true and own it without pointing at the other person, without you statements, but saying something like, I notice when I hear things like this, and you repeat what the other person said, I feel on edge, I feel angry, and I'm not even able to hear the rest of what's being said. I wonder if we could close the gap, and if we can go away from each other for a little while and find another way where these same words could be reconstructed in a way that I might be able to hear them, because I want to hear the message and not be taken off guard. Now, that's an example of how you can tell the truth and close the gap, because if we aren't willing to go there and have the hard conversations, we really will eventually erode trust more than build it. And I'm curious if you agree with that. I'm curious what the folks that are chatting with us today feel about this one.
Yeah, I'm super curious to hear from you guys how you handle those conversations, because I know for me, there's been plenty of times where, especially if I'm feeling like I'm not maybe being appreciated within the conversation, or I'm not having the space to be able to express myself within the conversation, my first reaction is to go, well, you are doing this to me, right? And I love what you just shared, because, yeah. And
what does that do to the other person?
It just puts them right back into the non-trust space too. It's like, oh, well, I got to defend myself now, right? And so, yeah, and Lorraine's saying, I feel statements are a must. And I love that, like, hey, I experience this when I hear this kind of thing. And it just keeps it into a place where I can just express that, to me personally, this is what I experience. And it's not telling the other person that they're doing that to you. It's just telling them that we have the ability to, or telling them how we receive it.
Right. And Mary Wilson just said it. Honesty is always the very best way. It's just finding the kind words that can say the hard thing. And Shirley, I'm glad we could help you with that thorny situation, because there's always a way to say the hard thing in a palatable fashion. And I've learned, and maybe you've learned this too, Andrew, that when we slow down and take time to construct what we're going to say in a mindful, deliberate fashion to not trigger the other person, we actually start to take more responsibility for ourselves about what was my part, or what do I need to change in me, or is there some part of me that needs to be less reactive? So I think it gives us a chance to grow ourselves and be better people. It's so easy to fling out that thing you want to say and then figure you're going to repair it later. But as was it Haley at the very beginning asked the question, you keep doing that over and over and over again, you erode trust, and you become somebody that is seen as volatile, and they'll fix it later, but I'll say anything in the moment. That's not trustworthy.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember how you said it too, but there was something to that as well, where you can say, can we step away from this and come back? Because I want to understand, like, I want to be a part of this conversation. So what's your experience with being able to, what's the word I'm trying to, or the question I'm trying to ask here? I'm trying to get to a point, because it's those experiences that I'm putting myself into where in the moment, I know that I'm not going to be good in the conversation. And kind of going back to that comment of, at that point, what's the chemical?
What could be cortisol, could be adrenaline.
Cortisol is probably already pumping. I'm probably already stressed. I'm probably already frustrated. And in that moment, I know I'm not going to be good. So, like, how can we give ourselves that opportunity to start a conversation and then say, you know what, can we pause and step back? Like, how do we do that?
Well, I think you have to do it before you need it. I think you need to get the suitcase packed before you take off on that trip. For me,
Okay.
I have to own it, because the worst thing I want to hear is somebody say, "You're triggered. We need 20 minutes. See you later." You know, to me, I'm going to be.
That's what I
I'm
don't
not
want
going to
to
be
say.
here. I'm not going to be here in 20 minutes to listen to what you have to say because you just said I was triggered. You know, there's something like that. So the first thing I want to do is take responsibility and say, I feel like I can't hear you. I want to hear you. I need to go somewhere and kind of sort this out. Would it be okay if we take 20 minutes? And so I take responsibility for it, because I don't know what's happening to the other person. I can't say we've both been triggered. I can't say we both are upset. That's assuming. So, and I don't want somebody to do that to me. So I think you write these down and practice them. And if you really want to be good at it, a salesperson, Blair Singer, who created Sales Dogs, taught me this. If there's something that you need to pack in your suitcase and have ready whenever you need it, you say it over and over in the mirror, in the car, in the shower, until you can say it sincerely in the right tone without an ah, and a pregnant pause. And you practice it every once in a while, so it's still there, it's ready to go when you need it, and then you use it.
Yeah.
Another thing that I heard a CEO say this last week that was brilliant, when somebody was trying to pester her and get her to lose her cool, and they said, "I think I'm triggering you." And she came back and she said, "Oh, I'm not triggered. I'm just getting more and more clear about what we need to do next." And I thought that was such a great, honest, truth-telling, I'm not triggered, but I am getting clear, which told the other person basically a lot without having to say the words.
I'm getting real clear here.
I'm just getting more clear.
Yeah.
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 So
And,
respond, don't react. Yep, these are good.
Yeah.
Love Blair Singer.
Compassion. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So I like Anne's question here, and I know it's a little bit more focused on communication, but I think that, hey, communication is trust. So I think it's a very appropriate question. How do you deal with people that are unwilling to communicate better, but you still have to work together?
So I use the trust a lot. And honestly, that's some of the elegance of this trust model, is to use it regularly. Maybe spend a day on the first T and a second day on R, and just keep cycling through it. But another one is to, sometimes you're going to have a candid conversation that you may get to a point where you're like, look, I'm just going to write down on a card here how much trust I feel like we have between 1 and 10. You write down on a card how much trust you feel like we have 1 to 10. You write it on a card, you put it in an envelope, you seal it, you don't see each other's. And then you say, okay, what number do you want to get to? 10 is high, 1 is low. Where do you want to go? You guys agree on a mutual number and just say, what do we need to do to get there? That is one way to just call it out and tell the other person you want to build trust. I think someone said it earlier, but we build up a lot of stories, and our brain doesn't like a vacuum. It doesn't like blank space.
Right.
So we may have a lot of assumptions and stories that we've told ourselves about this person and who they are and what they want and what they don't want. And it might be just the candid conversation of saying, I want to build better trust with you. I actually get a feeling that that's not something that we mutually want. Notice I'm avoiding you statements.
Right.
And I'm curious if that's a story in my head or if there's any truth to it. Could we talk about that? And so you don't have to solve the whole enchilada at once, but you take off a slice of that and you just start to incrementally approach it. And you might be surprised how many assumptions and beliefs and stories are going on in both sides of that coin. That's just a cursory, quick way to look at that. It's a good question.
Yeah. I love that suggestion. It reminds me of Brene Brown. She talks about story quite a bit and how to use that conversation around the story, because yeah, one of the pieces, again, since we're talking about neuroscience, one of the things that the brain needs is it needs the full story. It needs beginning, middle, and end.
Middle and end. Mm-hmm.
Right. But the brain's purpose is to protect you. It wants to keep you from harm. So if it doesn't know what the middle and end looks like, it just knows your perception of the beginning, it's going to probably create the worst case scenario to try and protect you. And so just what you shared really reminded me of what she said she uses pretty often in her discussions, which I really like, which is, hey, so during this conversation, here was the story that I told myself in my head. Can I share that with you? And I was like, oh, that's so brilliant, because it already sets up with the other person that, hey, this is just the story I created. I don't know if it's true or not, but this is what happened in my head when we had this conversation. And so kind of a similar approach to what you're saying is, don't put it on them that like, hey, I don't think you like me. But if you say to them, hey, the story in my head is that, here's what I feel like is maybe happening between us, and I don't want that to happen. Is there something that we can do with, is there something we can co-create, which I love that word, to shift that? And it's amazing how much less defensive you put, how much less of a defensive position you put someone in when you have those kind of conversations.
Yes. And to your point, Andrew, I think everything that you're saying, I'm nodding to and thinking, when we want to build more trust, we take the responsibility of starting that. Like, it's so much more courageous to be the person who takes responsibility for building it and being responsible for what we do in day out than expecting other people to do it.
Yes. There's this class that I'm teaching soon, and I told you that I was going to be looking through the Soul Salt book, that you had trained me way back in, I think it was 2009 was our first training together with Soul Salt Academy. And I was looking back through that book, and that Franklin Covey circle of concern, circle of influence was one of the first things that popped up to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot how beautifully simple that is. And it's to this point, because if our focus is on the thing that we have no control over, that's the circle of concern. And the more we focus on those things that we have no control over, which is their opinion and their thoughts, you can't control their opinions and their thoughts. So what we can control, that circle of influence, we can control how we show up. We can control how we present ourselves. And like you said, we have that ability to be the one that says, you know what, I'm going to be the one that steps up to start to build this trust. It's so beautiful.
That's, if we all did that, we would change the world.
Anne said, I have to admit, I do not look forward to this, but I am willing. So great point there, right, Lynn? Because this stuff,
yes,
I think sometimes we talk about it and we make it sound like, well, this is easy. Just say this. And it's like, that's not how it feels.
It's simple, and yet it's not easy, especially when we're having an amygdala hijack and we've got cortisol thriving in our system instead of oxytocin. It's really difficult to act like a grown-up. It's really difficult to take the high road. And that's where it's a question of character. And you're not going to make it every day to that high road. There going to be some times when you're going to be down in the mud, slinging the mud. And so you have to be gentle with yourself and patient with yourself. But it is, if you have the willingness, then that's all it takes. And I think we actually have a free offer for those who are willing. Do you have a link? Because I think we sent you a link that if anybody wants to take this on, I'll virtually coach you through 5 weeks. And each week there'll be a prompt of how to take a piece of the trust model and apply it. So I'll be your virtual coach. Every Monday, you'll get a prompt, gives you something to practice for the week. So use that willingness, play with it, experiment, go on a bit of an adventure with it. Don't expect to win the day. Just play with it, start to integrate it. And then the next week there'll be another and another. And after 5 weeks, you will see a shift in your relationships.
Absolutely. Dana, if you can pop that into the chat. So those of you that would like to take Lynn up on this incredibly generous offer for some virtual coaching, Dana behind the scenes, she's going to pop into the chat the code. You are going to text the word Wednesday. And as soon as Dana throws it in here, I'll be able to tell you what the number is that you have to
what the number is.
To.
I know the numbers, but I have just enough dyslexia that I know I'll transpose them.
It's
I know there are some 4s and some
222.
Yes, there you go. Okay, thanks.
Yep. So yeah, thank you, Lynn. That's an amazing offer, and what a great way to practice this. Because Earl, I don't know if you saw Earl's comment earlier, but he said, "Lynn, I wish I could shrink. I wish you could shrink and live in my brain. I'll pay you."
You know what? Some people call me Jiminy Christian instead of Lynn Christian, because after I work with them long enough, they start to think that there's this little part of me sitting on their shoulder. So if I can do that for people, really though, all it is it's your wisest self sitting there, remembering what we talked about and feeding it back to you. And you attribute it to me, but it's your inner wisdom talking to you.
Yeah, we've all got that Jiminy Cricket, because I definitely, living in Utah for a long time, the LDS crew in Utah use the WWJD really often. What would Jesus do? And I'm like, that's amazing. And I started to think, like, I do that with Lynn. I'm always like, WWLD. What would Lynn do? Oh, man. Lynn, any final things that you would just send them away with around trust, or how to grow that trust within us?
I would just say, take one thing, just one thing, and be willing to play with it and experiment with it if it spoke to you, and see what happens. You don't have to know everything. You just have to be willing to discover things. And so that would be the wisdom, is take something that was meaningful to you, even if it was something in the chat that Andrew and I didn't talk about, that occurred to you during this time together, and decide what you're going to do with it, and then follow through as an experiment or as an adventurous little test, and just enjoy the process.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Lynn. This has been so awesome. Like, I'm such a neuroscience geek, so this has been so fun for me. And I think I almost want to have like a session 2 where we do kind of focus in on like maybe some challenging conversational processes, like how to have those tough conversations and how to show up in conversations where we do support trust. I think that'd be a great follow-up to this.
Yeah, we can do that. And if anybody wants to send us some tough conversations, so we have something to really chew on, yes, that would be fun.
That'd be fantastic. Well, and thank you so very much from all of us here at SamVia. We appreciate your generosity with the virtual coaching session. And again, if you're interested in 5 weeks of virtual coaching, you just need to text the word Wednesday to the number 44222. And that'll be in the chat on the Facebook and YouTube chat, just in case you forget. So thank you so much, Lynn. We appreciate you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
So make sure to reach out to Lynn. Also, go follow her on social media, and you can find her Lynn Christian or Soul Salt on most platforms. She puts out so much great content, great little video clips, little visuals on just coaching tips. So definitely someone you want to follow.